Okay. What's up, everyone? We are here in London. We are here with Lex. You want to quickly introduce yourself?
Hey, good to be here. I'm Lex. I'm a co-founder of a venture fund called Generative Ventures, where we look at crypto AI and DePIN. Previously, I was at Consensys, where I was the chief economist, then the chief marketing officer, and also helped with the fintech and the DeFi products. And then I've got a background as an entrepreneur, mostly in fintech, and I'm excited to be here.
That's super exciting, Lex. And I mean, you're a titan in the space. You literally, I think, I was so impressed when I joined the Consensys that you knew so many topics on different kinds. And I really like also the fact that you're really aware about the ecosystem. And I think, today, obviously, we want to talk about AI agents, but I was impressed about one of the newsletters that you send out around AI agents is something that is always been there, right? And you were speaking about also the fintechs, and you probably are really aware about what's going on at a bit more high level. So what is kind of the state of AI, or could be even AI agents today in Web2 around big titans, or that are really something that I'm always wanted to understand, because I feel like right now all this kind of AI agent wave, those frameworks always kind of existed on kind of Web2 rail, right? But AI at the end is AI, right? We're trying to build this automation system no matter which technology are run on.
Right. Well, you're very kind. Thank you for the compliment. I've always just tried to work on things that I find curious and interesting. And so I've tried to follow the frontier in my career where there are hard learning curves. And definitely this part of our industry has a hard learning curve. And so when things are difficult and mysterious, people tend to use magical language because they don't understand what the things underneath it are. And crypto's got lots of magical language, and that's both the danger and the opportunity, of course. So I think if you zoom out and you look at AI is just math, right? So we have complicated statistics and math that dates back to the 50s and 60s, and a lot of the architectures like neural networks and so on were invented a very long time ago. And it's only now, or really in 2012, 2014, when the hardware became good enough to brute force the math to generate good results. So for example, if you've got an algorithm that is meant to recognize a cat or a dog, and you're running that on a Nintendo or Game Boy, and it's wrong 80% of the time, it's not super useful. If you run that on a more powerful computer and it's wrong 30% of the time, you're still like, wow, that's a pretty stupid robot. If you run it today and it's wrong less than 1% of the time, whereas the average person is wrong 5% of the time, then the math is better. And in short, that's why NVIDIA is now a $3 trillion company, right? Because you can use these mathematical architectures to do things that approximate human reasoning and how the brain works, although today at a really low level. And so we've had this boom on the hyperscaler big tech Web2 side in generative AI. So generative AI is the opposite of not the opposite, but it's kind of like the inverse of machine learning. So with machine learning, you give it a data set and then it analyzes it and gives you an answer. Whereas with generative AI, you give it an answer and then it hallucinates a data set. And the data set can be an image or language or the next token in a stream of text, which is what large language models are, and so on. Okay, so then now you've got this sort of algorithmic goo, which can generate inference or reason. That's still pretty far away from economic activity, right? So what is economic activity? You're hungry, you want a sandwich, I'm a sandwich maker, you come to me, you pay me $5 for the sandwich, and it costs me $1 to make the sandwich from ingredients, and all of a sudden we've created $4 worth of value because you're willing to pay it, I'm happy to accept it, therefore consumer surplus, therefore GDP and the economy, right? And then we have commerce, and then on commerce we start having financial services, and then we get financial infrastructure. Do you put the payment on, your Visa card or stablecoin, blah, blah, blah. But without that atomic unit of economic activity, there's nothing. It's, we have a very good example of what happens when you build financial services for financial services, and that's called Terra Luna, Olympus DAO, God bless them, and all the other bullshit that our industry has created, because we're missing the economic activity that actually matters. Not entirely, but in large part. So this is the sort of black hole that I've tried to organize the fund around, is trying to figure out what's the economy that is going to be banked by crypto, not DeFi for DeFi or, God bless Hyperliquid for yet another perp exchange so people can go 100x long on things. There's nothing wrong with degen and speculation, but like usually you need a thing to speculate around. And so when we look at economic activity, I start thinking about, okay, like what's the machine economy? What's the economy that comes from the productive capacity of this big gray goo of reasoning that is now being packaged by Web 2, right? So you've started with the hardware of NVIDIA, then you've got the foundational models that have been trained on the entire internet, the summation of human knowledge. And now we're kind of in this process of packaging them up into, people will say, workflows or use cases or business processes or vertical integration. This one's for marketing, this one's for doctors, this one is for internet girlfriends, whatever it is. Crypto seems to be like really into internet girlfriends. And far fewer internet boyfriends, although, anyway. So we're in this place of, we don't even have the brain. We just have like the raw brain matter. And the delta between that raw inference and doing things that people find useful, like making a sandwich or making a digital sandwich, making an NFT sandwich, or having a character that needs to have digital sandwiches, whatever, it's pretty long, that value chain. And so other people in the industry will talk about applications versus infrastructure. I just think that's too reductive. And for me, like this lens of economic activity and being productive is more helpful. But I think what we're seeing in Web 2 now is a ton of stuff that is packaging up inference for where there is demand, right? So like looking for the hungry people who want sandwiches of all kinds. And so the things I find most interesting are like the pockets of demand. One of them, so the regular pockets of demand are like people using ChatGPT for everything, like asking questions. Another one is people using the Anthropic API to plug in the models into applications. Another obvious and predictable one is things like, Accenture and Ernst & Young and other consultants repackaging AI to sell into big enterprise engagements. Another big Web 2 theme is sort of the death of software as a service and being able to spin up software on the fly. So software that codes more software, robots that make more robots. And so stuff like Cursor and DePIN and blah, blah, blah. And so, that would transform the SaaS industry. So there's a lot of big bets. Another place where you have had quite a bit of demand in Web 2 is, this company called Character AI. And Character AI is the closest thing to like a consumer hit. It's been bought again by Google, and I think it'll be shut down end of the day. But the form factor is there already, which is people, mostly lonely teenagers on the internet, want to talk to robots for emotional needs. End of the day, whether it's like role-playing games or whether it's internet girlfriends or whether it's like school scenarios or whatever. Like it reminds me, since I'm ancient, of like the late 90s, early 2000s, like forums and like 4chan sort of vibes, right? Where like it's all edgelord bullshit end of the day, but like people by the millions are talking to robots and putting themselves in scenarios. And so that's like a new behavior, in the same way that like TikTok was a new behavior, Facebook was a new behavior. Like spending time talking to a bot about your life and role-playing is a new behavior. And in Web 2, that was trapped in a website form. So you go to a website, it looks like DeviantArt. It's got like 100 little portraits you click on. Most of them are anime, and then you talk to them. So that's Web 2. I'm going to just bridge it for a second and then stop talking because I know it's going on.
It's okay.
So then you look at Web 3. And in Web 3, there's, in my mind, 3 categories of stuff. There's obviously more, but I think there's 2 meaningful categories and one sort of like catch-all. So the 2 meaningful categories are crypto people thinking they can do AI better. So if you've heard the sort of like big tech privacy issues or IP issues, or it's expensive to run a data center, decentralization can make the product of AI better. That's kind of one clump of people. Venice, Morpheus, BitTensor, and so on.
Coffee.
Lots of stuff there. And I think I like it, and it's obviously valuable from a speculative perspective, but my intuition is that there's not a lot of evidence that crypto people are very good at making anything better than the people who actually make it.
Yeah, yeah.
So the people who make social networks make better social networks than crypto people do. The people who make games make better games than crypto people do. The people who make art make better art than the crypto
Yep.
people who make art, right? Like Pudgy Penguins,
Yep.
fantastic financial asset.
Yep.
As far as like profound, deep art goes,
Yep.
like, you know,
That's another story.
I also enjoy SpongeBob SquarePants.
Yeah.
Like, great.
Yeah.
No offense.
Yeah.
It's just,
Yeah.
you know, like the art part is not
Yes.
the thing.
Yeah.
And so I think when it comes to AI, I'm also a little bit skeptical
Yeah.
about the raw sort of like how powerful the model is, how good the data collection is. I'm still a little bit skeptical that a crypto approach makes a better product.
Yeah.
But we're definitely investing in the category and we're learning. The second category in Web3 is the one that for me is the most intuitive, which is that crypto is robot money. And there will be more robots. And so crypto as financial infrastructure for robots, software robots, or crypto is like economic architecture for robots. The difference being like economic architecture is like I can own a thing, right? The way I own a digital asset.
Yep.
Or I permission it, or I co-own it, or
Yep.
you know, like so. Like if you look at that category, it's the financial, it's adding capital markets and payments to an existing set of stuff that is out there. And I think that's what crypto historically has been good at, is the finance stuff. And so, you know, if you look at things like virtuals, they're not good at the AI stuff. God bless them. But they're really good at financializing the bootstrapping of these things, you know, capitalizing them. Character AI, which is the Web2 virtuals, which was first by a year and a half, had 15 million in revenue. Virtuals trades at 3 billion, right? So clearly value unlocking is what. Another example is we invested in this company called Nevermind, which is a payment processor for AI agents. It can take USDC, but it can also take, you know, like the tokens of the protocols on which the agents live, or that provides the compute. So I think that attaching wallets, just like all of that financialization, the second category, for me makes a lot of sense. There's a third category of random stuff. Random stuff is we need a TE or a ZK verification that the soft chain model ran here or there. We need to, you know, on this data set add provenance to all of the data, blah, 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 right? That's sort of like a grab bag of ideas that in my mind are features within larger problems. So those are the three categories in Web3. You know, and I think that, you know, the path, as long as this market doesn't completely collapse, which it absolutely can, I think the path to me is clear, which is Web2 pushes the edge in what AI can do at the limit, and then Web3 takes the open source and then reconfigures the ownership of those fruits of labor and then builds the economic structure for the type of productivity that can come out of the industry.
Makes sense. So it kind of like repackaging, it makes sense. I really like also what you're saying around kind of like, you know, kind of, let's say Web2 AI, where you're saying it's better to kind of start from the demand and get understanding really the needs of like the users, and then you build kind of the infrastructure based on that. It's kind of like reverse engineering on a much better way. One question that I had is that, what do you think? Like, first, I'm always like skeptical in terms of like, do we need those DAOs? Do we need those treasuries behind all these kind of like, you know, agent frameworks and different kind of like trajectories? And then the other kind of like question always that I have is that what are the challenges today, both for kind of like the builders in the space and kind of like the user, of grasping all these kind of like frameworks or idea? Because sometimes I feel now we will get like similar to we have layer 2 fragmentation today, we will see more and more kind of like could be framework fragmentation based on kind of like, I don't know, programming language that builders can kind of like build on top. But also I feel also like on a way that users somehow will get a little bit frustrated because they don't know which island to go to and how to choose their kind of like, you know, product based on the architecture, because we know better that users don't choose based on the sometimes like the technology. They're even like, you know, Polymarket, people didn't even know that was deployed on a specific layer 2, and the majority of logins were SSO logins, right? So this is actually a clear statement that the technology is less relevant. So I'm also asking myself, like, you know, first, what are those challenges that you think that both builders and users are perceiving today? Maybe, you know, there are no challenges because the market is still not developed enough, right? And then also the other question was, do we need those DAOs? Do we need those treasury, or we should just be focused on building the technology of those framework specifically?
Okay. I think there's a lot in there, and it's hard to take the question head on. So I'm going to
yeah,
kind of dodge it and zoom out. So like, crypto is a very schizophrenic industry. You know, like Bitcoin, for example, it is both a, you know, huge fundamental technological accomplishment where there are developers and users who care about it for very fundamental reasons, like the innovation of the chain, the integration into payment processing, the usage of the asset as a store of value. Those are real things. You can talk to a private equity guy in New York and make that persuasion.
Yep.
At the same time, you also had the have fun staying poor psychopaths that are only interested in the thing as a speculative gamble and enjoy the meme and the story of it. And, you know, just as well would be happy with no fundamentals and still push that story. And on top of that, sort of at the very edge of that side of the market is the market structure, which is that global capital markets with different regulatory regimes implies that you have people who are market manipulating everything all the time. So it is a feature of the industry that all the prices are pump and dump. And that's not good. But market manipulation is embedded into literally every single token. And you can call it by different names. You can, you know, you can call it market support or creating liquidity, and there's various red lines that people cross or don't cross, and it depends very much on geographies you come from. Things that are, you know, kosher in the Philippines are not kosher in the U.S., right? Or in people things that are kosher in I don't know. Everything's different in every country, so you can't really bring your moral compass to everything in the same way. But the point is, there's a group of people for whom the price is the main product, and the way that product is manufactured is through algorithms that manipulate and control the price, right? And so everyone who's been in crypto long enough knows this, right? And so on the one hand, it's the degen side, and the other side is the fundamental side or utility side. And sometimes the degens are winning and it's financial nihilism, and all the fundamental utility people are idiots for wasting their time trying to make a better world. And then in other times, you know, the markets wipe out and everybody loses everything except the people building real stuff and generating revenue because they actually care about doing something. And long enough in this industry, and you end up holding both opinions simultaneously. So you can, you know, I end up believing that both there's a fundamental sort of like real thing going on, and all of the market structure is bullshit and manipulated, right? And so when it comes to, you know, should it be this framework for AI or this framework and so on, it's really difficult to like invest in the space because from one perspective, all the crypto AI stuff is just crypto financial engineering games that are wearing AI robes. And that is literally what the AI agent boom is. It is meme coins with bolted on personalities, just a sticker on your head for this is who you are, and then the thing shields itself and so on, right? So you can be really nihilistic and say the only thing that's here is just like manipulated price action and you know it's pump.fun but with a costume. Or you can look at it a completely different way, which is to say that, you know, like Web2 is building AI agents that they own that are deployed through their server farms that harvest your data, where you have no control over who you're interacting with or how. And moving this stuff to crypto allows us to actually own it and have self-sovereignty over it. You know, and then the same things that you say about money systems, where no one in the Web2 world is going to give bank accounts or the ability to wire money or like do financial actions nearly as quickly as we have in Web3. And so we have profound innovation in giving agents the ability to control assets, to move them around programmatically, to respond to people and do actions on their behalf, to bootstrap fundraising. And then I think in the medium term, you know, if we have $10 billion market cap AI agents that control a multi-billion-dollar treasury, those programs can choose where they're hosted. They can choose what, you know, where their GPU is sourced from which country, for example. They can source what models they're using because those are in the long run going to trend towards the cost of zero because they're open source and commodities.
Yep.
And so you're going to have these software entities that have money and budget that can then actually go and create commerce and economies around them. And both of these things are true. I think both the second thing about the fundamental sort of innovations that crypto is bringing to the space is true. And it is also true that what we're seeing today is largely a series of, charts and financial gains that are net negative, which makes it really difficult to answer the detailed question of like, what framework do you use? Like, because I don't know, go have fun.
Yeah, I know it's tricky. I think the kind of like agent utilization will be depending also like which ecosystem, kind of like what's the kind of like approach, but also will depend also like from the builder side who can actually build or a subset of those agents and how easy and accessible will be this technology that those agent framework will provide, right? But in the same time, it's funny because delegation, all these kind of things are always being there. Could be also on socials, right? But the question also, like maybe I'm a little bit biased because we are talking in this period, in this last 3-4 months, we are talking about AI agents for supporting socials, for supporting marketing activities. I feel like these discussions are kind of like started to happen more now compared before, even if in Web2 we had a lot of those kind of like, let's say, agency models, like delegation has always been there, right? But no one really was delegating to agent their social account or something. So my question is also, what are kind of misconceptions you think there are in the ecosystem today, right? Like one thing that I always thought about is this is nothing new, right? We're repackaging kind of like this operational automatization on kind of Web3. We are recalling like AI agents, and this is something definitely that was not new because automatization and kind of like connection in Web2 has always been there, right? So what other kind of misconceptions you think there are right now around this topic? Those are spicy questions.
Compare. Imagine you work at a large corporation, say Campbell's Soup. Okay, imagine that you're at Campbell's Soup, and you're using Office 2007. Even better, let's say you're at Wells Fargo and you're using Office 2007. Okay, and you open Outlook, and you got some emails, and then you send an email to your boss. It says, "Dear boss, comma, blah 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 blah, best, comma, whatever." Now take that and compare it to an anonymous Twitter troll that posts 24 times a day, or like, be somewhat controversial, but like an OnlyFans person who does TikTok, right? So all three of those are methods of communication. You're sending some sort of content across, but to compare like the enterprise productivity focused outlook to, like consumer permutations of content, just sort of nonsense, right? Like just completely different character.
Yeah.
And so I think in Web 2, all of the AI agents, not all, but most, outside of the character AI stuff, which is very consumer, are kind of like that 2007 Outlook email to the boss, right? It's, can I get an AI agent that reviews compliance documents? Can I get one that answers customer service requests? Can I get one that looks through my accounting statements to try and find a failure of accounting? Can I get one that looks at insurance claims to see if something about it is wrong? And then we go to sort of like on-chain crypto AI entities that control money and whose job is to get attention. And it's not that their job is to like do marketing for like Campbell's Soup and tell the best story about Campbell's Soup so people go buy it in the supermarket. Their job is to just like crush it and have an all-out war about manipulating people into self-destructive actions, in the sense of you get addicted to some AI personality on Twitter, and then you start sending it money, and it starts sending you tasks and so on. So it's just the quality of the things that we're seeing in enterprise Web 2 land. Number one is much more productive, of course, than the Web 3 side, because like those things are helping in the processes of organizations to do things that are 100% fundamental, utilitarian, and are real. But I think what Web3 can't just be like, great, let's take this customer service agent and financialize it. It doesn't make sense. So I think in Web3, what we might see though is experiments with building companies out of swarms of agents that can be connected to DAOs and mutual ownership. I think we're probably going to churn through literally every single version of the Web2 stuff in some distorted and weird way that's impossible to really predict. We haven't seen much agent-to-agent interaction. We haven't seen much in the sense of like simulations. So I think that's an interesting direction. But yeah, otherwise I'd say it's hard to answer your question because the behaviors in these spaces are just so different. Like imagine you removed all speculative and financial upside from crypto, and then that's kind of what you're left with in the Web2 world.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point. I mean, what do you think, like, then how we can differentiate a little bit? I mean, think about, could be a content creator, could be like, a business analyst, how do you think, like, people can actually start differentiating themselves? I mean, do you want to actually differentiate yourself on this kind of like output? Or what do you think, I mean, how we should move in this kind of, let's say, robots economy to actually like create value, or like showing a quality, like there's some kind of like waves of discussion, like where emotional intelligence will be much more harder to provide. So kind of like, training yourself on that direction will be much more, I don't know, smarter. I'm hearing also a lot of discussion around, I could be like, original versus non-original content being created, where non-original content, but I'm always assuming that at the end, content and quality is perceived by the users. If your agent is providing better quality content than yourself, it doesn't matter, right? Exactly, right? So how we should move ourselves, like in this kind of like, agent
as an individual.
Yes. Or even as a builder, I think also like how the builders and the founders in the space, knowing that this is happening, how they can actually like, move themselves or specialize themselves. Because maybe, an answer could be, don't focus anymore on creating value, because the value that will be created will be by agents. So you need to build, processes around creating value. I mean, where in the kind of like the value chain, or even like the answer could be even like, I read a book back in the days, was like value creation versus value generation, where actually like, where aggregating value sometimes is more important than creating value. And look at big business models, like, Uber, Airbnb is aggregating value from customers, not really creating the specific value, right? Maybe an answer could be, aggregation of value is a great way to differentiate yourself, right? Because you will have this value created, could be by agent or whatever, but aggregating in one single place is something that will make a real difference, right?
Yeah. It's nice to think will be useful. So
Maybe not.
what you've described is the strategic aggregation theory idea, which is how Web2 companies are built, right? Which is by offering services for free, creating a platform that captures both sides, and then once you've captured the economic activity, then introducing various trends, whether they're visible or invisible. I don't know if that's stable or particularly desirable or very, or like requires humans. Like, I think Ethereum and EVM has shown that you can create a protocol that practices aggregation theory, but distributes the, let's say, economic spoils to the participants. Maybe that's, again, I fall more into the utilitarian fundamental camp, and that's the nice story about Ethereum. But I think it's true. I think on the earlier point, you've sort of articulated a distinction between the chef and the critic, or the writer and the editor. I don't know that distinction is going to hold. There is not any great reason why a very smart AI model will be a worse editor than a person, or why an AI model would be a better writer than a critic. So I have a newsletter, a couple of newsletters.
Yes.
And we've seen the use of AI both ways, right? So in one case, I will have AI generate the first draft, and then a human writer will edit it on top of personality or like slight language changes. So it's, so the AI is the writer, the human's the editor. And then in the other case, the human's the writer, because right now it's a little bit more considered. But for things that are sort of routine or uninteresting, like in the text, they'll need to summarize a news article from 6 paragraphs to 2. Then they will go and they'll hire the AI as a writer, and then they will plug it in. So I don't have any evidence that we as humans are safe by being the aggregator or the critic or the editor. I don't think that, and then there are AI architectures like generative adversarial neural networks, GANs, which were sort of the architecture before LLMs, that explicitly have a generator and then a critic. So they have something that generates lots of content, and then they have the second part of the process is to edit the content to make it fit again what's necessary. So I don't think that's a safe distinction. I also don't know that we really need to plan that far out because things are changing really fast and it's in completely unpredictable zones.
Yeah.
So my approach to stuff is, you start as a craftsperson or you start as a beginner, and then you try to learn a craft. And as you learn the craft and you do some things manually enough, then you start being like, okay, this part of it I can speed up or automate. And then you can introduce a workflow, an automated workflow into it. And then you do that a bunch of times and you're like, okay, well, actually only 10% of this I need to do myself, and the rest can be a software factory, right? In the older days, it would be things like Zapier or other kind of manual, it would be a production line you would put together in some other way. Now you can probably do all that production line plus a little bit more with AI. And then maybe like once your job is done, you can actually add on to the production line at the end some AI to clean it all up, right? So you can have multiple, they're not called agents today, but they can be different workflows that and eventually, and probably very, very soon, you can take yourself out of that entire thing, and then you've got the production line complete. And then you take that, and then there's a whole bunch of jobs to create the deployment infra so that that thing can run on its own, which is still not trivial. If I want like an AI agent to run my Twitter, it's not trivial yet. It's a pain in the ass. Like I used Top Hat the other day, and it had to connect into my Telegram, and like it was just
it's not easy.
funky. And so that now you're like orchestrating how the AI agent behaves in the thing. And then, just fast forward 2 more years, and instead of one AI agent, you've got 500. And so now you're managing a system that manages systems that blah, blah, blah. Kind of go up higher level of abstraction. I think just the way I'm wired, and people are wired differently, but the way I'm wired, I would never be comfortable at the end of the journey without having done some of the craft myself. So that's my only recommendation is like, don't build trash. If you're building the endpoint of I'm managing a system of AI doctors, and the only thing I know is the abstract system that manages the AI doctors, and then you've never been a doctor, like a lot of people are going to die from your stupid AI doctors. So maybe still go to medical school. But your medical school is about like less about being hands-on, but enough of the craft. And then on top of medical school, then you start studying comp sci, and then after comp sci, you learn like whatever network administration.
That's a really good point, because also I think it will be part of the decision-making process, right? If I will have, 10 different newsletter, I know that, like Lex provide really good value for the past, 3 years in the fintech newsletter. And I know that will be an agent, Lex intern newsletter being done. I will definitely I will definitely decide to go with something like that, because I have kind of like this trust that you kind of like oversee the entire process. So probably this is kind of like a variable of my decision making on the kind of like the past track record of the builder of this framework or this tech stack. Yeah, I think that's definitely like a good idea. And I mean, we kind of talk a little bit about everything, right? Kind of like the state. I really like also the analogy where kind of like I agree also on the Web2 side, especially on the machine learning side, where we kind of like to play, even like 2 years ago, where all the IoT wave happened. You remember that, when people were debating like, yes, but you need network engineers, and the top network engineers obviously are running in top tier Web2 companies. And I don't think you can build actually a better network stack. Yes, it could build and over an open source track on Web3 Rails, but at the same time, where the talent is on the traditional and the traditional industry, right? So, and I feel like now we are reviving this with like specific machine learning automation. But I really like the fact that we are kind of like talking about it. Same with account abstraction, right? Before we had always smart accounts, right? But when kind of like 437, at least the formal EIP and the naming and the debate came out, we started to speak about how we can actually build smart account and delegate and build like light wallets. So that's actually like a good point, repackaging, renaming, so that we can actually finally debate with a single and standard discussion. But and then we spoke a little bit about the challenges, kind of like the trends that you're seeing about these three categories. I think that's actually quite clarified. Anything else that you wanna share a little bit? Like, I mean, you already touched on the trends, right? You touched also a little bit on how we can make maybe critical decision, or what will be the variables in the future of deciding which agent to choose. But anything else that you think that either builders or user will need to be aware? Because sometimes I feel we are a little bit biased. We are kind of like in this space right now, but the average Joe will not touching specifically like agent framework, will actually use the technology or will consume the newsletter, the data that will be in front of his eyes, right? So what do you think? Anything else you wanna share about some of these topics?
I think most people will have their AI interactions either with Google or with Apple. I think that Google's kind of the dark horse right now, where people counted them out. But I don't think they're out at all. And I think they're still, as a search engine, they're still in prime position to answer questions without a $20 monthly subscription. And then Apple is a complete wild card because it can, as it always has, completely fuck up crypto story. Because the Apple playbook is going to be to sell phones, which is their main difference from other hyperscalers. If they sell you a phone, they're happy, and if their phone is better, they're happy. So Apple's incentive is to do lots of small private models on every phone, and then tell the story that we care about your data and your privacy, and nobody will see it, and Apple will never touch it. It will be,
it's all good. It's all good.
We're still there. Amazing. Apple will, encrypt your data, and they'll use the word crypto without using the word crypto, and it will be stored on your local device, and you'll be okay. And so I think our industry really has to figure out a value proposition that isn't just a reaction to what other people are doing. We do the same thing but better because private and you can get paid. It's a very low bar. And so I don't know what the answer is. I think the AI agent boom on chain has pointed a little bit of the way. I also think there's a lot of hopium in the way that around NFTs, people thought, this is the new luxury model, and from now on, the only luxury that matters is my Twitter avatar. And while that is partly true, it's not all the way true. And so I think it's the same with these AI agents. People think they are money gods that will rain upon us all endless abundance, and if you don't jump on the train of the Ponzi now, you'll never get there. And it's partly true, but obviously not true all the way. But I think the door's been opened. And that to me is exciting enough to go through the door to see what's on the other side.
Yeah, it's definitely super exciting. I'm definitely also looking forward to incentives and kind of like, I'm starting to say